Hello class, this is Brian from financialtrainingschool.com and welcome to GT304 Currency Strength. So as a prerequisite, you should watch GT103 price quotes. It's not really necessary, but it provides some background information. So if you're not used to reading exchange rates, determining currency strength will likely be a confusing task, especially for non-business or non-traveling individuals. And I know this firsthand from my own experience, either from taking international finance courses or while I was a teaching assistant for economics. Exchange rates was one of the topics in the course. And every time I taught exchange rates, the students would always get confused. Every single year, and I've taught it for 3 years, each year at least half the class is confused about exchange rates because they don't see it. Because in everyday life, usually what happens at the bank or PayPal or online shopping in general is they simply just quote you the price. You go there, so for instance, I'm in Canada, so when I go on eBay.com or something, or if I go on some online site and they're denominated in US dollars, and my credit card is denominated in Canadian dollars and my PayPal account is denominated in Canadian dollars, when I go to the checkout page, it's going to tell me a Canadian price because they already converted the US dollar price to a Canadian dollar price, so that because that's what I'm paying. So in normal everyday to-day life, most people just see that price, so they don't really pay attention to what happens in between. So what I'll be doing in this lesson is explaining what happens between the exchange rate to the price quote that you get. So if you can't grasp this concept at first, don't worry. Just think it through slowly and you'll eventually understand, because you're not used to it. It's basically just a jargon and the mechanics issue. Once I walk you through how it works, and after you see a few examples on your own, then you'll eventually understand how it works. And lastly, before we start, the information contained within this lesson will be the foundation of the Forex series and a few of the binary options lessons. So I'm going to switch to Paint now because I'll have to illustrate some arrows and all that stuff, so it's easier to do this in Paint than to do it in PowerPoint. So like I mentioned, I'm in Canada, so naturally it's just easier for me to observe the USD CAD. So I'll be using this Forex pair for this example, and I've just randomly picked these numbers to use. Just a note before we start, in order to get the numbers, basically I picked the left side first, or it doesn't really matter because they're both reciprocals of each other. If you divide 1 divided by 0.93, you'll get 1.03. Or if you divide 1 divided by 1.03, you'll get 0.97. So as long as you get one side, you can just do the reciprocal and you get the other side. So that's how I got the numbers. And depending on where you live, you might be quoted a different number. So for Canadians, when we read the newspaper, we usually get the price on the right. And you can usually tell which quote you're getting by the first symbol in the Forex pair. So the CAD USD is what we see in the newspaper, or when the news channel comes on and they're saying the Canadian dollar is rising, or the Canadian dollar strength is going up, or something like that. So the latter half of this lesson will be on currency strength, but before we get to that, I just want to get into the mechanics of how these exchange rates work. So, and then for the people living in the States, they might be quoted a price on the left. So they'll have the USD CAD, so that when their newspaper compares the US to the Canadian economy, they see 0.97. So they'll be like, oh, the US dollar is going down, our strength is going down. So I'm going to start on the right first, since I'm in Canada. It's just easier for me to start on the right, and then we'll go to the left. So on the right, let's say the example that we're going to be using is I'm going to go traveling in the States. So let's say I'm going to go to LA for a week for vacation, for example. And maybe they accept Canadian dollars, maybe they don't, I don't know. But to be safe, I'm going to convert whatever spending money I plan to spend into US dollars, so that when I go there, I can just spend the US dollars. So let's say I was willing to convert, I don't know, $10,000. So let's say I bring 10,000 Canadian dollars to the States. At the border, I would exchange that, and let's say the exchange rate is 1.03. So that if I exchange it, so I go to the currency place and I tell them I have 10,000 Canadian dollars. I want US dollars. We're going to go from the 1 CAD to the 1.03 USD, which means for every Canadian dollar I have, I will get 1.03 US dollars back. So if I have 10,000 Canadian dollars, I will get 10,300 US dollars back. And what you label this direction depends on what terms you're using. You could either be selling Canadian dollars or you could be buying US dollars. So it depends. So you could sell Canadian dollars, or you can buy US dollars. So that's when we're going to the States for vacation. So let's say by the end of the week, I still have about $5,000 USD. When I'm coming back to Canada, obviously I don't want to keep the US dollar because, well, I mean, most stores in Canada accepts US dollars, but their exchange rates aren't that great. So I would rather just exchange it at the border. So I would go the other way. So I would have 5,000 US dollars and I would convert it back to Canadian. And again, depending on what terms you want to use, you might use the appropriate things. So you would be either selling the US dollar, or you could be buying the Canadian dollars. So now for the left hand side, as you may or may not know, I've owned businesses in the past, and when I used to buy from my suppliers in Canada, they only accepted US dollars because their international trading partners would deal in US dollars. So they just dealt with US dollars in the local market. So I would have to watch the USD CAD exchange rate on a daily basis to find out when's the best time to convert my money so that I could go buy inventory from my suppliers. So instead of starting on the top this time, I'm going to start on the bottom. So I would basically focus on this 0.97. If it's say 0.98, then that would be expensive. If it's 0.96, that would be cheap. You know, so I'm just always constantly looking at this because I'm thinking, how much Canadian dollars do I need to buy one US dollar? That's the mindset, because I had to deal with US dollars, so I had to constantly buy it all the time. Obviously, you can look on the right side as well, but it's just a reciprocal, so it doesn't really matter which side you're looking at, but I'm explaining both sides, because depending on what country you're living in, you might see one or the other. So on this side, so let's say I want to buy 10,000 US dollars. So I would need, based on 0.97, I would need 9,700 Canadian dollars to get the 10,000 Canadian dollars. So in this case, I would be buying USD, or I would be selling Canadian dollars. Then, let's say, I don't know, a month or two later, I have excess US dollars, and maybe the US dollar is rising in strength. So at this point, I want to sell because I'm holding extra capital. I might not need it, etc. Whatever. This is obviously getting into a business conversation now. But let's say I have extra capital and I want to liquidate my capital because, hey, it's expensive now. So let's say the rate became 1-to-1, for example. So I could sell back the extra US dollar to get back Canadian, and I would make some profit there. So let's say I had 5,000 extra US dollars. I could sell it back, and I would get back, let's say the exchange rate was 1-to-1. So previously, before, I only had to put 0.97 to get 1 USD, but now 1 USD can get 1 CAD. So I made a 3-cent profit per dollar. So going back this way, you would be buying Canadian dollars, and you would be selling US dollars. And that's the mechanics going back and forth. So depending on which side you're on, either on the left side or the right side, whatever the case may be, then that's going to be what you're looking at. And this is the mechanics of the exchange rates. So now that you understand how the exchange rates work, this will tie into how you determine the currency strength. And I briefly outlined that with my last example, when we originally exchanged 0.97 Canadian dollars for 1 US dollar and later exchanged back 1 US dollar for 1 Canadian dollar. That was a rise in the US strength. Okay, the easiest way to do this is when you're looking at forex pairs, the first symbol is the one that controls it, basically. So if you see the USD CAD, so let's just pick green. So let's say this goes up to 1.0. That means the US dollar strength went up. Conversely, on the other side, if the Canadian USD went from 1.03 down to 1.00, that means the Canadian dollar went down, or went down in strength, or decreased in strength, or whatever. That's how you determine these things. So depending on how the price is quoted, then you just have to watch out for how the forex pair is going to be affected by it. So let's just go through another example again. We're comparing this to a new number. So let's just pick the 1-to-1. So 1 USD equals 1 CAD. So the thought process behind this is you just look straight at the numbers. It might seem confusing at first because if you don't know which side you're looking at, then it's kind of awkward because you're not thinking from a business point of view. So the way that you think of it, see, we're still using $1 US and $1 US, but what's different now is the Canadian dollar. Previously, $1 US was only worth 0.97 Canadian dollars or 97 cents, but now $1 US is equivalent to 1 Canadian dollar. So if you think of it from the other point of view, Canadians have to pay more to get the US dollar now, or US dollar is worth more so they can get more Canadian dollars on the other side. So at first glance it may seem a little awkward as to why it is the way it is, but after you understand the mechanics of how the foreign exchange works, then you'll understand why this is the case. And also for the other side, so let's just do the number example using red. We have 1 CAD is equal to 1 USD. So same thing. So now the Canadian is the same, and you're just comparing the US dollars. So previously you had 1 Canadian dollar which you could sell to get 1.03 US dollars. But now, since the Canadian dollar is worth less, you can only get 1 US dollar. So after you walk through these mechanics, maybe this would make things easier and hopefully it would make sense. So I just want to end off with, say, another example in relation to a preview to what news is like. So like let's say we have the Euro USD. So let's just pick another color. Let's just pick blue. So let's say we have the Euro USD. Well, actually that's bad color. Let's pick yellow. So Euro USD. Let's say we have, I don't know, employment data came out for the States. So let's say US employment data was good. So US employment data good. So US employment data being good means that the US economy is going to get better. So we're looking at this from the right side. So this is Euro USD, it's not USD Euro. So we're looking at it from on the right side. So that means since USD is going to be better, it means the Euro USD is going to go down relative to its original position. So if it initially started at, let's say it started at it's around like 1.3 right now. 1.30. Let's say 1.30 starting initially. And then eventually it's going to go down to 1.29. Okay? Because same example, see here we went from 1.03 to 1. Now we're going from 1.3 to 1.29. So this is just a preview for what's to come later on in the Forex series and the binary option series. But basically when we analyze news release, this is what we need to understand it, because you need to know the mechanics of how Forex pairs works to understand the currency strength, to understand which direction we're moving. Because as soon as employment data comes out, you know it's good. That means you know the USD strength is going to increase, which means you know Euro USD is going to go down. And you know the CAD USD is going to go down. And you know the USD CAD is going to go up, etc., etc. So as long as you understand the mechanics behind it, just trade accordingly. So that's it for this lesson. Hopefully this clarifies or explains how the mechanics behind exchange rates work, and a brief preview into how currency strength can be determined by news release, etc. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.